She's insured. We have a crisis. I am Delaney Vaughn, a 32-year-old compliance counsel. I spent $150,000 on a down payment for their retirement home, only for my mother to abandon me in the emergency room after a severe car crash. Just text us when she's stable, my brother Derek muttered, already walking toward the exit. I didn't scream. I didn't beg them to stay. I just quietly picked up the engraved Vaughn fountain pen and pulled my federal credit report. 14 days later, when they stroll into my rehab clinic, expecting me to sign over my property, they will not get a deed. They will face a legally binding eviction notice and a federal fraud alert, delivered right in front of the notary public they brought to coerce me. Let me show you how a compliance audit really works. I know how suffocating it is when the people supposed to protect you only see you as a resource. If you understand this, please like, subscribe, and comment your location and local time. I read every single one. Let's go back to the cold hospital bed where the illusion of family finally shattered. The fluorescent lights above my bed hummed with a dull, persistent buzz. Nurse Sarah stepped into the trauma bay, carrying a clear plastic bag containing my salvaged belongings. My collarbone throbbed with every shallow breath, 3 cracked ribs pinning me flat against the stiff mattress. You need to rest, Miss Vaughn, she said, reaching for the IV drip monitor. I stared at the bag resting on the bedside chair. Give me the black leather sleeve, I said. My voice was a rasp, but the command was absolute. She hesitated, noting my bruised forearms, but finally placed the heavy corporate laptop onto my lap. Reclaiming my machine was a vital first step, but the physical price was instant. A wave of nauseating pain surged down my spine as I lifted the screen. The hospital's public network blocked my firm's secure portal immediately. Standard enterprise firewalls treat unverified medical Wi-Fi as a high-risk security breach. My fingers moved over the keyboard with mechanical precision despite the tremor in my knuckles. I manually reconfigured the network adapter, entering a multi-factor authorization key to bypass the local proxy restrictions. I breathed slowly through my nose, ignoring the white-hot agony in my ribs with every single keystroke. 4 minutes of cold, deliberate calculation yielded a flashing green icon, access granted. My compliance dashboard finally bloomed to life under the harsh fluorescent lights. I dragged the cursor across 8 years of digitized bank records and liability ledgers. I earned $300,000 a year evaluating regulatory risks for global corporations. Yet my personal balance sheet looked like a crime scene. $64,000 for my brother Derek's failed logistics venture, routed through my personal credit line. $18,000 for my father Gerald's club memberships and golf outings. $900 every month for my mother Brenda's standing floral delivery at the senior lodge. For years, I told myself I was just being a dutiful daughter protecting an aging family. The figures on the screen told a harsher truth. I was an unpaid insurance policy, a financial buffer designed to absorb their chaos. My mother hadn't abandoned me in the trauma unit out of panic over my injuries. She had walked out because Derek faced an urgent legal default that afternoon, and she needed to manage his crisis while I was unconscious. I unzipped the front compartment of my leather bag on the bedside table. Inside my wallet sat 3 platinum supplementary credit cards, issued under my name for Brenda, Gerald, and Derek. They were quiet parasites, fed by my labor while I lay broken under sterile lights. I opened my central credit dashboard to sever their access once and for all. Before I could execute the revocation command, a dark red warning banner erupted across the monitor, mortgage guarantee pending. My fingers froze over the trackpad. A massive secondary lien had been filed against my retirement property. Using my stolen personal information and a forged signature as authorization, the crimson warning banner pulsed softly against the high-contrast screen of my corporate laptop. $420,000. Listed as a pending secondary encumbrance against my sole-titled property in Oak Ridge. The timestamp recorded the initial filing at 3:14 on Tuesday afternoon, precisely when orthopedic surgeons were placing titanium pins into my shattered right femur. I adjusted my posture on the stiff foam mattress, swallowing down the bitter taste of hospital antiseptic. My ribcage protested with a sharp, stabbing ache. But my mind remained entirely clear and focused. The primary lender was a private equity finance group notorious for funding high-risk corporate restructuring. Someone had submitted my personal tax returns, my private equity portfolio statements, and a notarized personal guarantee while I lay intubated in the intensive care unit. I opened a secure, encrypted browser window and navigated directly to the administrative portals of the 3 major credit reporting agencies. Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax required strict identity verification protocols that standard identity thieves could not easily bypass. I accessed my corporate security vault, inputting my primary social security number, my federal tax identification code, and a 24-character alphanumeric master passkey. My decade in regulatory compliance had taught me one fundamental rule when a fraud vector emerges. You do not ask questions first, you isolate the breach. I selected the Emergency Credit Protocols tab and checked the legal declaration confirming unauthorized financial activity under federal banking regulations. My fingers moved across the keyboard with quiet, mechanical precision despite the dull throb in my bandaged wrists. I checked the box labeled File Nationwide Credit Freeze, generated a single-use 10-digit master security PIN, and pressed the final execution button. The screen blinked twice before displaying a solid green confirmation banner across all 3 agency portals. Federal security freeze activated immediately. All new line of credit applications, title transfers, and mortgage guarantees were now hard-blocked across the entire domestic financial system. A quiet surge of control washed through my chest, cold and sharp as ice steel. The financial tap that had been secretly attached to my life's work was officially dry. Before I could minimize the administrative browser, a yellow diagnostic warning popped up at the bottom of the security dashboard. System alert automated notification dispatched to secondary administrative contact. A cold stillness settled over my shoulders. 7 years ago, when I first purchased the Oak Ridge property, the closing attorney had set up a legacy family profile, listing my mother's email address as an alternate emergency recovery contact. The system had automatically generated a high-priority security alert and delivered it straight to Brenda's inbox. The message contained one unambiguous sentence: a security freeze has been placed on the primary credit file associated with the Oak Ridge deed. I reached for the trackpad to purge her address from the administrative registry, but the damage was already done. Less than 40 seconds later, my personal cell phone vibrated violently against the stainless steel bed rail. The phone danced across the metal surface with a harsh, rhythmic buzzing that echoed off the sterile white walls. The caller ID displayed the name that had governed my entire life, Brenda Vaughn. She was not calling to ask if the surgeons had saved my leg or if my broken ribs allowed me to breathe. She was calling because the invisible pipeline to $420,000 had just been severed from the inside. I stared at the flashing screen, my face entirely expressionless, and let the phone ring out into the quiet room. The silence of room 412 felt suffocating, punctuated only by the rhythmic beep of my cardiac monitor. I accessed the secure portal of Heritage Merchant Financial, using my legal compliance credentials to request an immediate audit copy of the loan package. As a senior compliance counsel, I knew which administrative backdoors yielded unredacted closing files. Within 48 seconds, a 38-megabyte PDF file downloaded onto my desktop. The cover sheet displayed the cold. Official title: Secondary Commercial Deed of Trust and Promissory Note. The principal sum was $420,000, secured against my primary residential property on Oak Ridge Drive. I scrolled directly to page 36, where the borrower's signature block rested under a bold legal warning regarding federal perjury. The name Delaney Vaughn was written in dark blue. Wet ink strokes across the line. Standard electronic signatures use uniform digital fonts, but this was a physical scan of an ink signature. I magnified the document to 400% on my screen. The strokes exhibited heavy shading on the downward lines and a faint feathering along the loops, the undeniable mark of a medium nib fountain pen. It was made by the sterling silver instrument, engraved with our family name, the very pen my mother kept in her desk. My mother Brenda had not merely stolen my personal identification numbers, she had sat at her desk and practiced my handwriting. I stared at the elongated tail of the Y in my last name. She had mimicked my legal signature with precise, calculated slants, pressing hard enough to bleed through the heavy paper. Every loop was a deliberate choice to convert my life's labor into her personal liquidity. She knew I had purchased the Oak Ridge house as my personal refuge, paying $150,000 in down payments from 7 years of 80-hour workweeks. To her, that blood, sweat, and discipline were simply unmined capital waiting to be harvested for her real family. I flipped back to page 14, where the fund disbursement instructions were detailed in black ledger text. The entire $420,000 had not been set aside for my medical care or an emergency trust. The wire had been routed directly to an escrow account belonging to Apex Logistics LLC, my brother Derek's hemorrhaging freight company. I remembered the frantic phone call I received 3 weeks ago while reviewing a corporate merger in Chicago. Derek was facing a federal audit for unpaid payroll taxes and commercial lease defaults. My parents had begged me to clear his debts. And when I refused to jeopardize my professional standing, they simply waited for an opportunity to rob me. The door to room 412 clicked open, and Nurse Sarah stepped inside pushing a stainless steel medical cart. Time to check your blood pressure and rotate the leg elevation. Miss Vaughn, she said, her voice soft against the quiet hum of the room. She wrapped the black nylon cuff around my upper arm and began pumping air into the band. I sat perfectly still, holding my breath as the cuff tightened against my bruised skin. Your heart rate is 98, Sarah noted, eyeing the monitor with mild concern. Are you experiencing increased pain? I looked her dead in the eye and said quietly, No, nurse. Everything is becoming entirely clear. They did not see a daughter lying in a trauma ward with fractured ribs and a shattered leg. They saw a temporary distraction that bought them time. My near-fatal car crash wasn't a tragedy to them, it was a convenient window of opportunity. While surgeons were stitching my torn muscles, Brenda was sitting in her sunroom, carefully tracing my name onto a fraudulent mortgage deed with that engraved silver pen. She wasn't saving her family from ruin. She was sacrificing one child to protect the illusions of another. As soon as Sarah adjusted my IV drip and left the room, I dragged the PDF document into my firm's automated forensic compliance software. Within 2 minutes, the algorithm generated a certified high-resolution analysis report confirming a 96% probability of handwriting forgery. Having this official scan and forensic breakdown was a decisive victory. I held undeniable evidence of criminal bank fraud. I opened the lender's online dispute portal, attached the forensic report, and clicked the button labeled Initiate Formal Fraud Dispute and Loan Cancellation. Before the submission could process, a bright amber dialog box flashed across the center of my screen. System Requirement Federal Identity Theft Dispute Protocols. The text beneath was unforgiving. Pursuant to Banking Regulation 1026. Fraudulent lien cancellations exceeding $100,000 require an in-person, sworn physical affidavit executed at a regional branch office. Online dispute submissions for this account tier are suspended pending physical verification within 72 business hours. A heavy, suffocating weight settled over my chest as I read the mandatory administrative rules. The nearest regional branch of Heritage Merchant Financial was in downtown Atlanta, 42 miles away. I glanced down at my body, pinned to the mechanical hospital bed by heavy traction weights, a fiberglass cast covering my right leg from hip to ankle. 3 broken ribs made even a deep breath feel like a knife twisting in my chest. Medical discharge was at least 2 weeks away, and the hospital staff would never clear me for transport. The clock on the wall read 6:42 p.m. I had 72 hours before the fraudulent wire transfer officially cleared and attached permanently to my land title. My mother knew the system. She knew I was trapped in this bed, unable to walk into a bank branch to sign a physical affidavit. They believed my physical brokenness would guarantee their legal victory. I leaned my head back against the thin pillow, closing my eyes for 3 long seconds. They thought my confinement made me powerless, but they had forgotten who drafted the very compliance bylaws they were trying to abuse. While my body remained immobilized in the recovery wing, my administrative authority was far from crippled. I spent 2 painful hours on the hospital's secure portal, executing a Level 1 federal fraud alert across all national credit registries. The system immediately flagged my social security number, ensuring that any real estate transfer or notarized liability document attempted anywhere in the state would trigger an immediate hard stop. But setting the trap required absolute discretion. To keep Heritage Merchant Financial from foreclosing prematurely while keeping my family entirely blind to my countermeasure, I had to sign the hospital's official long-term medical stay forms. I bowed my head and signed the physical admission documents, accepting 6 more weeks of institutional confinement as the price for keeping my cover intact. Before hiding my laptop, I sent a single document to the ward's private network printer, retrieved the single printed page, and slid it beneath my thin hospital pillow. At 3:15 on Thursday afternoon, the heavy double doors of room 412 swung open with a sharp click. My mother Brenda stepped into the room first, clutching an oversized bouquet of yellow roses. Her face twisted into an expression of exaggerated maternal sorrow. Behind her walked my father Gerald, his eyes fixed firmly on the linoleum floor, followed by my brother Derek, who clutched a thick leather accordion file against his chest. Bringing up the rear was an older man in a tailored charcoal suit, carrying a heavy brass seal, Arthur Collins, a licensed notary public. Brenda hurried to my bedside, dropping the flowers onto the tray table before pressing a trembling hand against my forehead. "My poor, sweet girl," she whimpered, her voice dripping with artificial grief. "We have been sick with worry every single second." I lay perfectly still under the white sheet, my expression completely neutral as I watched her performance. "You didn't answer your phone on Tuesday." "Mother," I said quietly, my voice raspy against the quiet room. Brenda didn't miss a beat, dabbing at the dry corners of her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Derek had a horrific panic attack. Darling, we had to rush him to a specialist while the trauma surgeons were working on you. A mother cannot be in 2 places at once. Delaney, but we are here now, and we are going to fix everything." She turned toward Derek, giving him a sharp, subtle nod. Derek stepped forward, opening the leather folder and pulling out a stack of heavy, legal bond paper. Brenda smoothed the papers over my blanket, resting her hand gently over my bandaged wrist. "The hospital administration says you need to authorize these supplemental billing and liability releases so you can remain in this private rehabilitation suite. Delaney," she whispered softly, "we know you're in terrible pain, so we brought Mr. Collins here to notarize it right away. You don't have to worry about a single detail. Just let your family carry the burden." Gerald stood near the foot of the bed, shifting his weight uncomfortably, while Derek stared at the ceiling, unable to look me in the eye. I glanced down at the top page of the packet. Beneath a fraudulently manufactured hospital logo lay a legally binding quitclaim deed and asset assignment, designed to strip my title to the Oak Ridge property and assign all proceeds to satisfy Derek's default judgment. Brenda reached into her designer handbag and unscrewed the cap of her sterling silver fountain pen, the very pen she had used to forge my name 2 days prior. Her eyes gleamed with supreme confidence, convinced that a broken, isolated daughter would eagerly grasp at any crumb of affection. She held out the silver pen, pressing it gently into my palm. "Sign right here on the line, marked primary owner." "Sweetheart," she coaxed, her smile tight and triumphant. "Do it for us. Do it so we can finally be a real family again." I felt the smooth, cold silver of the engraved pen against my fingers. Beneath my pillow, my left hand rested against the crisp, sharp edge of the printed notice to quit. I did not pull my hand away, nor did I raise my voice. I turned my head slowly toward the charcoal-suited notary standing quietly by the window. "Come closer, Mr. Collins," I said, my voice steady as cold iron. "Make sure you watch every single letter I write." Arthur Collins stepped closer to the edge of my hospital bed, setting his heavy brass notary seal and digital registration tablet onto the tray table. My mother Brenda leaned over me, her perfume sickeningly sweet against the sterile hospital air, holding out the silver fountain pen with a tight, triumphant smile. Just a quick signature on the primary owner line. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her voice oozing artificial warmth. "Mr. Collins will stamp it, and we can put this tragic ordeal behind us forever." My brother Derek leaned forward, his knuckles white against his leather folder, his breath hitching in eager anticipation. I did not take the pen. Instead, I rested my hand flat against the heavy bond paper and turned my eyes directly toward Mr. Paper. "Collins, before I place my mark on this document, Mr. Collins, as a licensed notary public bound by state liability laws, I require you to read the document title aloud," I said, my voice quiet, clear, and steady as cold steel. Brenda's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, her penciled eyebrows knitting together. "Delaney, don't be ridiculous. You're exhausted and confused," she snapped, her tone sharpening instantly. "It's just administrative authorization for your medical coverage. There is no need to waste Mr. Collins's valuable time with formal recitations." I ignored her entirely, looking straight into the notary's eyes. "Turn to page 3. Mr. Collins," I instructed calmly. The notary hesitated, glancing between my mother's tense face and my utterly unreadable expression. Before flipping the packet over, his eyes widened as he read the bold, underlined heading printed across the top margin: "Quitclaim deed and absolute asset assignment. This is a real estate title transfer. Mrs. Vaughn," Mr. Collins said, his voice dropping into a stern, professional register. "You informed me this was a medical power of attorney. Under state notary regulations, executing a real estate conveyance under false representation is a Class 3 felony." Brenda's cheeks flushed a blotchy, mottled red. "It's an internal family arrangement," she hissed, reaching down to grab my wrist. "She agreed to this. She bought that house for us, Mr. Collins pulled his tablet toward him and tapped his administrative security code to run a mandatory title verification against the state portal. The quiet hum of the room was suddenly broken by a sharp electronic chime from his device. A glaring crimson banner flashed across the notary's screen. Visible to everyone in the room, transaction blocked. Active Level 1 federal fraud alert and title freeze instated by sole owner. Mr. Collins immediately snatched his brass seal off the table and closed his leather ledger with a heavy, definitive snap. "I am terminating this notarization immediately," he declared, stepping 2 full paces away from my bed. "This file carries an active federal identity theft alert. Attempting to execute a title transfer on a flagged property constitutes active bank fraud." Brenda froze mid-sentence, her jaw slackening as her eyes locked onto the glowing red screen. Her fingers lost all strength, her leather designer handbag slipped from her forearm, hitting the linoleum floor with a heavy thud as lipsticks, pill bottles, and receipts scattered across the tiles. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out, only a dry, wheezing gasp that rattled in her throat. Beside her, Derek stumbled backward in panic, his elbow slamming into the stainless steel cart and sending a glass water pitcher crashing down, shattering into dozens of sharp fragments across the floor. Gerald did not reach down to help his wife. He took a step back, turning his face away toward the window as if trying to erase his presence from the room. I picked up the silver fountain pen from the bedsheet, held it between 2 fingers, and laid it down gently on the tray table. The illusion was gone, the ambush destroyed. And for the first time in 14 days, my mother was completely speechless. Arthur Collins quietly gathered his tablet, packed his notary seal into his leather briefcase, and walked out of room 412 without uttering another word. The heavy oak door clicked shut, leaving behind a suffocating silence broken only by the hum of the air purifier and Derek's erratic breathing. The shards of the broken glass pitcher glittered on the linoleum like spilled ice, reflecting the harsh fluorescent ceiling tubes. My mother knelt slowly on the cold floor, her manicured fingers trembling as she picked up her scattered pill bottles and stray cosmetics. She looked smaller, her coiffed hair suddenly disheveled, the sharp elegance she had cultivated for 30 years dissolving in a matter of seconds. I slid my left hand under my hospital pillow and pulled out the single sheet of crisp white paper I had printed earlier that morning. It was not a plea for affection, nor was it an emotional letter explaining my pain. Across the top margin, bold capital letters read, "Unconditional notice to quit and eviction demand." I held it out toward the middle of the room, my arms steady and unyielding despite the tight bandages wrapped around my chest. "Take it, Gerald," I said, my voice echoing off the sterile walls with absolute finality. My father hesitated, staring at the paper as if it were burning coals, before taking 2 reluctant steps forward to pull it from my fingertips. "What is this?" Gerald muttered, his reading glasses shaking violently as he scanned the legal clauses. Brenda pushed herself up off the floor, clutching her purse against her ribs, her face pale as parchment. "It is a 30-day legal eviction notice for the Oak Ridge property," I stated, staring directly into my mother's wide, bloodshot eyes. "My name is the sole title holder on that deed. You, Gerald, and Derek have 720 hours to remove your personal effects from my house. On the 31st of this month, the local county sheriff's department will execute a formal writ of possession. Any remaining presence on the premises will be prosecuted as criminal trespassing." Brenda let out a ragged gasp, her fingers clutching her throat as if air had suddenly become scarce in the room. "You are throwing your own parents onto the street," she whispered, her voice cracking into a shrill, raspy pitch. "We raised you, we gave you everything, you owe us your entire life." "Delaney," I did not blink. I did not raise my voice. "The $420,000 you attempted to steal, combined with 8 years of unauthorized credit card charges, has been submitted to the State Attorney General's Fraud Division," I replied softly. "You spent 30 years treating my life as your personal emergency fund. Today, the account is permanently closed." Derek grabbed my father's shoulder, his knuckles white, his eyes darting toward the door in sheer terror. "Dad." "She's not bluffing," Derek stammered, his confident swagger completely erased. "If the sheriff comes, my pending commercial loans will be revoked immediately." My mother opened her mouth, trying to gather the remnants of her manipulative authority, but no coherent words came out. Her knees buckled slightly, and Gerald had to grab her arm to keep her upright. Without another word, my father turned her around, steering her trembling body toward the exit. They retreated through the heavy doors, their shadows fading down the long, white corridor, leaving behind only the broken glass on the floor. The heavy oak door swung shut, sealing out the echoes of my mother's retreating footsteps. Nurse Sarah returned 10 minutes later with a broom and dustpan, quietly sweeping the shattered glass from the linoleum before slipping out without a word. The sterile quiet that remained in room 412 was no longer suffocating or heavy. It was vast, clean, and entirely mine. On the bedside tray, the sterling silver fountain pen sat motionless where I had left it. I picked it up, unscrewed the engraved barrel, and dropped both halves into the stainless steel sharps container mounted on the wall. It fell with a dull, heavy clatter among discarded needles and surgical plastic, never to be touched again. I reached into my leather bag and retrieved my wallet. I unzipped the side pocket and slid out 3 platinum supplementary credit cards issued under my corporate account. Each card bore the same last name across the front: one for Brenda, one for Gerald, one for Derek. For 9 years, those pieces of embossed plastic had traveled to high-end department stores, boutique resorts, and mechanic shops across the state, billed directly to my personal line of credit. I opened the bedside drawer and picked up a heavy pair of stainless steel surgical utility shears. I held Brenda's card over the small metal wastebasket beside the bed. The steel blades bit into the thick plastic with a sharp, mechanical snip. The magnetic strip split first, followed by the metallic chip, dividing her name cleanly in two. I did not blink. Nor did I reach up to wipe away the cold sweat on my forehead. Snip. 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 Gerald's card tumbled down next in tiny, useless square shards. Snip. 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 Derek's card joined them at the bottom of the bin, buried beneath crumpled alcohol wipes and discarded gauze. The financial pipeline that had nourished their appetite for nearly a decade was officially dust. I leaned back against the thin hospital pillow and looked out the window at the late afternoon sky. The rain had stopped, leaving long, clear streaks of gray light across the glass. There was no dramatic warmth in my chest, only the quiet, sober reality of a clean slate. I had reclaimed my house, protected my name, and severed the parasitic ties that bound my life to theirs. A debt you didn't agree to carry is just a theft wearing a polite name.